Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. And today we are into Leviticus 5, descending into legislative madness. Anybody want to open up with any colorful comments on this chapter of this book?
Just more sacrifices.
Yeah, Star Wars did it better.
Blood magic.
Bring out
More
your dead.
blood. Get
Bring
blood
out
all
your
over
boobs.
everything.
Yeah, the amount of blood sprinkling on people is disturbing.
It makes me think the Satanic Temple really needs to up its game if they want to, try to make a run at this whole blood magic thing.
Yeah, they really are way behind Yahweh. I mean,
Yeah. We don't even wave a chicken over our head. What the hell?
Please don't.
Use money.
All right.
yes,
so,
please use money.
Arn,
all right,
you
everybody,
need
we
to
we're
tell
gonna
the whole
just dive into it today.
Arn, you need to tell the whole story about the chicken, because the waving is supposedly transferring your sins to the chicken, and then you feed the chicken to the homeless because they don't
So wait,
sin.
if
They don't
this
sin
is
enough.
a substitutionary atonement, why didn't the Sanhedrin put him on a string, wing him above their head, and then feed him to the poor?
Yeah,
I mean, they kind of do that part now in churches.
The feeding
I
them to the
suppose
poor is
it was.
equivalent to the priests eating the bits that are permitted for them. It's
So
really-
so when the poor eat the sinful chicken or whatever it is,
yeah.
doesn't that make the poor sinful?
I mean,
No, no,
technically
I'm saying
speaking,
it's like after it's like with the over here what we're talking about, right? We talk about these different offerings and stuff, and then some of it is burnt, and some of it is eaten by the priest, and some of it is eaten by the owner. So in the same thing with the chicken thing they do before Yom Kippur, they transfer their
burn the
sin
sin off
to
of
the thing, and then they don't really do any burning though. They just once it's sacrificed, it's kind of that's the atonement. And then
Surprise!
there's meat. So what do they do with the meat? They give it to the poor.
It's surprising the Republicans don't do that yet, since they already think that the poor can go to hell. So
Oh, they only
Would
said,
be
well,
nice
that would
symbolism.
involve feeding the poor. One, we can't have that. And two, they only like killing children with AR-15s.
They want to eat the poor apparently, but I'm just all for eating the rich personally.
Well, if you buy Atlantic salmon, you never know.
Yeah, but God said you can't eat fat, so
Though Trump would feed a lot of people.
Yeah, you know what? He's just
Probably give
fat
him
and
indigestion.
gristle in a cheap beer marinade.
I
Okay,
tried a
then
Trump
it's some,
steak
like, whale
once, and it
blubber then
was
at that
it was
point.
very
Turn him into
disappointing.
a lamp oil or something. I mean, he
And he
gaslights
would have-
everybody, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That amount of
I'm gonna
fat
roll with
would
this
make
joke
a-
for a while because I'm on a good mood right now.
you trying to get rid of our appetite before we read about the barbecue?
Hey, I already ate my breakfast. I'm set.
I didn't.
I
Screw
think
you.
we should start reading.
Yeah.
I
So
already
let's
had
dive
my
into
morning
this.
chicken abortions.
Who's reading today? I see Mighty Chicken. You missed a couple of shows, haven't you?
Yes, I'd love to read today. That'd be fun.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
You can actually finish this chapter.
Finish the whole chapter?
Yes,
Yeah, we
26
did that for
verses.
the past year. Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right. All right, Leviticus 5. If anyone sins because they do not speak up when they hear a public charge to testify regarding something they have seen or learned about, they will be held responsible. If anyone becomes aware that they are guilty, if they are unwittingly touch anything ceremoniously unclean, whether the carcasses of an unclean animal, wild or domestic, or of any unclean creature that moves along the ground, so like all of us, and they are unaware that they have become unclean, but then they come to realize their guilt, or if they touch a human uncleanliness, anything that would make them unclean, even though they are unaware of it, but then they learn of it and realize their guilt. Or, gosh, it sounds like I'm trying to read a document right here from Legal Ease. Or if anyone thoughtlessly takes an oath to do anything, whether good or evil, because of course we know what that is, in any matter one might carelessly swear about, even though they are unaware of it, but then they learn of it and realize their guilt. When anyone becomes aware that they are guilty in any of these matters, they must confess in what way they have sinned. As a penalty for the sin they have committed, they must bring to the Lord a female lamb or goat, because obviously, from the flock, because we all have flocks, as a sin offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for them for their sin.
Like a compass arrow pointing north, the finger of a man will always find a way to blame woman. I'd like to notice the only time that a female is specified, it's a sin offering. Last time
Indeed it is.
I'm curious how you take
Wait.
an
I
oath.
think
I
before
don't know it.
we start commentating, please finish this chapter.
Oh, I love the injections, actually. It's kind of interesting, but all right. Anyone who cannot afford a lamb is to bring 2 doves, because doves, or 2 young pigeons, because pigeons, to the Lord as a penalty for their sin. So you just have to go down to New York, I guess, and get a couple pigeons. That's pretty easy. One for a sin offering and the other for a burnt offering. Whatever. They are to bring them to the priest, who shall first offer them for the sin offering. He is to wring its head from its neck, not dividing it completely, though, because can't do that. And is to splash some of its blood to the sin offering against the side of the altar. The rest of the blood must be drained out at the base of the altar. It is a sin offering.
Blood magic. Everybody drink.
Cheers.
Yeah, I need to get a give here.
Yeah, you do.
Don't worry, there's Bailey's in my coffee.
Ooh, good call. The priest shall then offer the other as a burnt offering in this prescribed way, and make an atonement for them for the sin that they have committed, and they will be forgiven, guys.
Yay!
Murder some birds and you're set. Man, what a great idea. If, however, they cannot afford 2 doves or 2 young pigeons because they can't get a ticket to New York, then they go and bring an offering for the sin of a tenth of an ephah. Is it ephah? How do you spell it? Ephah, thank you. Of the finest flour for a sin offering, because there's tiers leveled, right? They must not put olive oil or incense on it, because it is a sin offering. So the Italians are out. Okay, they are to bring it to the priest, who shall take a handful of it as a memorial portion and burn it on the altar on top of the food offerings presented to the Lord. This sounds just like a recipe. It is a sin offering. In this way, the priest will make atonement for them for all of these sins that they have committed, and they will be forgiven. The rest of the offering will belong to the priest, as in the case of the grain offering. So the guilt offering. The Lord said to Moses, when anyone is unfaithful to the Lord by sinning unintentionally in regard to any of the Lord's holy things, they are to bring to the Lord as a penalty a ram from the flock, one without defect, and of the proper value in silver, according to the sanctuary shekel. It is
I
a
just want
guilt.
everybody to notice I'm sinning. I'm touching a thing that moves along the ground.
You can also rub some blood on the ground too, but that's a really sweet thing.
That's adorable.
Yeah.
Who's a little unclean animal? Who's a little unclean animal?
For it is a guilt offering, and they must make restitution for what they have failed to do in regard to the holy things. Pay an additional penalty of a fifth of its value, and give it all to the priest. I'm thinking about Kenneth Copeland right now. The priest will make atonement for them with a ram as a guilt offering, and they will be forgiven. If anyone sins and does what is forbidden, any of the Lord's commands, even though they do not know it, they are guilty and will be held responsible. They are to bring to the priest as a guilt offering a ram from the flock, one without defect and of the proper value, just so you don't forget the previous one. In the same way, the priest will make an atonement for them, the wrong that they have committed unintentionally, and they will be forgiven.
Yay.
It is a guilt offering, and they have been guilty of wrongdoing against the Lord. That's it.
Isn't it
Come back.
fascinating?
Oh yes,
how people...
actually, Yes, it is because in the Hebrew Bible, verses 20 to 26 are in the Old Testament verses 1 to 7. In chapter 6.
Oh,
Yeah.
of the next chapter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So let's
This
stop
all
here
sounds
then.
so familiar from things we've already read.
Yes,
It's
because
incredible.
Like,
it's
last-
It
it's
just
similar
repeats itself
to
again and again and again.
I just
um,
like to point out that apparently allowing an innocent person to be falsely convicted of a crime and not speaking out on the truth with a public charge is in the same list as touching something ceremonially unclean. So if you scritch Piggy on the chin because he's so cute, that's the same as perjury.
That's not the
Okay,
no. What they're talking about is about the carcass.
Yeah.
It has to be dead. So
And also, it's not the
no.
Yeah. Also, the sin isn't just touching them. The sin is touching them and then doing something that you're not allowed to do while being in the state of impurity, like coming into the sanctuary or offering an offering or something.
What about when Jesus put all the sins into the pigs?
Well,
No,
then,
those
well,
were
the thing
demons.
is, then they went like over the cliff.
That's equivalent. That's like the Yom Kippur offering, the scapegoat offering.
Yeah, it was that.
It's
That's
true. It
interesting.
does the more you read in the Bible, the more you realize all the stories of Jesus are fictional, even if he did exist. Like they are all stories
that's-
about something that has a point theologically. It has nothing to do with what
Yeah.
physically happens.
Yeah,
And
there's
I always have a problem with how anybody believes this anyway. Jesus put sin into a pig.
Demons.
As if sin
Yeah.
is a
Oh.
thing. Okay, it put demons into a pig. That's right.
That's why they're so sinfully good. Ah, it makes
But
it makes
Yeah,
sense.
Bacon is
I don't see how
blasphemy.
I don't see how it can be analogous to like an offering, because you're not supposed to offer an unclean animal, and like a pig is considered.
Well, they're also
unclean,
forbidden
not
from
in the
eating
ritual
pork,
unclean, but
which is why bacon tastes as good as sin.
Because but it's a similar mechanism of driving it off the cliff and driving the unclean thing off the cliff. It's not exactly identical to offering an offering, but it's clearly like there's a metaphorical multi-layered.
And then
you can see
how-
they're making a theological point.
So how did Jesus cast the demons into the pigs? Because at this time, remember that people thought that air is spirit, and so bad spirits, bad air, including infectious
They
diseases,
also
cough.
thought the demons were people and are persons, and so he just told them to, because remember Jesus has that good magic, so he can
if the rabbi grabs the pig, the chicken, and waves it over his head so he can transfer the sin into the chicken. So how is Jesus transferring demons into the pig? Is he
I
grabbing
think
a
it
pig?
was just by like
completely
magic words
different
and stuff. I think.
system.
remember
Is it more like
he's allowed
the
to tell
demons
water to
are-
stop behaving like water.
Right.
So-
yeah.
Are there any Christians, I wonder, that read this and think Jesus cast the demons into pigs and then made the pigs jump over the cliff? Yeah, I believe that.
Yes.
Maybe
Oh,
maybe
you don't
the
have to
story-
worry because pigs fly. We all know that. They'll just fly away. It's okay.
It could be based
At
on
least off the cliff they do.
the story could be based on the belief that demons could, when they possess somebody, would be destructive. So the demon in the person would have killed the person if they had been allowed to stay. But by saying go to this pig, the demon killed the pig itself, not that Jesus killed the pig. Well, he killed the pig by giving them demons, but the demons were the
but
ones
he
that
gave them
made
demons to get them out of the person, so it's
Yeah.
like reciprocal magic, and he's
Yeah.
allowed to, because he has the commanding words of power, like Gandalf.
Right.
Is
But
there any
then the
demon
demons
possession in
killed
the
the
Old
pigs.
Testament?
Sorry?
Yeah.
Is there any demon possession in the Old Testament?
Ooh.
Is a demon possessed? Well, I mean, kind of a little ish.
Oh,
It's not
there's
exactly a
the
demon.
story of
There's
the story
all I can
of
remember is like vague references. There's
It's
nothing.
it's not
specific
exactly
like
a
Jesus.
demon.
in
What it-
Daniel. There's the story of the king.
I would call it a dark
Like, he's
influence, not a
crazy.
demon directly. I
Yeah,
think I know
it
what
was
you're
like
talking about. It's-
the phrasing that was used was
What is
like like the god put evil spirits in them or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
That was the phrase that was used.
They could induce someone to harm or tempt them. They couldn't, like, full-scale abomination possess them, but they definitely would get in there and
Yeah, but also
be the
demons
wayward
weren't considered
inclination.
pure
No,
evil.
those are very
back
much
then
the
either.
demons and those type of things are very much a creation far after the events of the original stuff in the Testament.
So God puts demons into people.
He put in, and at least in the Old Testament, he put evil spirits into people, like in order to get them to do something bad. Which,
all
of
loving,
course,
all good, right?
all
It's
good.
more
you know,
like
love
yeah,
free
it's more
will,
like he
but, like,
sent them to tempt them, or he sent a false spirit to the prophets to deceive them. You wouldn't go full abomination inside internal demon puppet. It would be like the demon would come and whisper ill to you.
Yeah, also I think the
Ooh.
demons weren't considered to be all evil earlier on. Like, Solomon talks with demons and stuff like that. So
More of a temptress.
Well, that was. I mean,
they
that
didn't
was.
become servants of the devil until much later theology.
I think that
So
was
the
like
little
the
girl with the
intertestamental
head
period.
spinning around, spitting pea soup, that was God's work.
No,
don't
that
forget
was
God's
the work of a
I'm sorry that I'm interjecting, but I feel we're diverging
That
from the
was the work of
subject because there are no
Yeah.
demons in this chapter.
Yeah,
And
so
surprisingly, there's no Jesus in here either.
yeah. Oh yeah, Aaron said earlier, like, did anyone have any preface to this chapter? And I forgot. I did want to talk about this chapter. Does bring up like the impurity, and that is a confusing topic because there's like the word impure, pure is used in multiple ways in the Bible, and in this case, it's talking about like the state of spiritual impurity. So if you are in this state, you can't go into the sanctuary, you can't bring an offering. And the way that you get this impurity is something to do with the life cycle. So if you touch a dead body, whether it's
Yeah,
a dead animal,
all the kinds of impurities are described in the next chapters.
Yeah, okay,
The
yeah, that
nice
makes
thing
sense.
about
The
the
next
state
thing
of
is-
impurity, though,
Sounds like they're just a bunch of germaphobes, doesn't it?
the laws are a lot more lenient, and there's a lot better tax breaks.
So I did actually want to bring up the meaning of Hashem.
the guilt.
I know that that was brought up a lot in the last chapter, but there's actually a connection here. So there have been various ways to understand it, and I know that Milgrom had an understanding of, well, this is because he used the evidence that this person has to be, like, the sin has to be made known to someone in chapter 4. So he uses it. Oh, well, they have to feel guilty. That's how it should be translated. The feeling of guilt. There have been scholars who are like, okay, maybe this should be translated as realizing guilt rather than feeling it, because if you do something and it has no immediate consequence, but you'll only feel the consequences of it later. So here's a quote from Nahan's book. This can like, if you take in neither of those explanations fit all the context of 4 and 5. So Nihan says that this can be logically explained, however, if contrary to Kyuchi, who was the guy who said that it should be translated as realized guilt, the realization of sin is not contained in the verb asam, but is only one of the possible consequences of asam, of asham. This is the view now defended in particular by J. Sklar, who proposes rendering asham by to suffer guilt's consequences. This solution accounts for the consequential meaning of asham in Milgrom, as well as for the fact that it may, yet does not need, to lead to the realization of the sin. Quote, an unknown sin has been committed, and the sinner becomes aware of it only because of some sort of suffering that results from the sin. Such a conception is well attested in the Hebrew Bible as well as in other ancient Near Eastern cultures, and it accounts for all the variations. So there's this different understanding of it. And there have been, some people arguing that, maybe they just forgot it later, but it was entirely, they forgot that they did this wrong later, but it's really unnecessary. So the issue in 5.4 here. So where is it? Should a person swear to utter with the lips, whether good or evil, of all that a human utters in a vow, and it be hidden from him. So that's how they understood, like, oh, well, hidden, that could mean he just didn't know it. But really, this could just be like the unintended consequences of something. So the issue in 5.4 is that initially the person was not aware of the full implication, and that's why the text specifies that the oath was sworn inconsiderately. Otherwise, it would make little sense. So therefore, the phrase serves as a circumstantial clause, namely, the person has made his oath consciously, but the latter implication and that being the oath. So the oath's implication have initially escaped them. There also seems
Like burning the first thing to come out of your door as a sacrifice to the Lord.
something like that, yeah. So there's
I think it's
Please,
more,
Mike Pence, walk in through my door, please. Oh, I shouldn't say
yeah.
that.
So, but the thing is, these instances in 1 through 6, they do share a connection, even though they don't, like, on the face seem like they do. In particular, a common point seems to be that these crimes may not be subsumed under the category of inadvertent offenses, as in Leviticus 4, but already include some degree of awareness, hence the systematic use of the term bishkaga. Is that right?
Bishgaga, yes.
Bishkaga, okay. Or the root for that term in general, as observed by several authors. So essentially, the point, the acts discussed in verses 2 through 4, so touching an animal or human uncleanness, are perfectly conscious, probably even deliberate, but their implications are not realized at the moment that they are performed.
I have a question about that real quick. Would that also constitute, I'm very serious about this, the idea that masturbation, for example, is a sin? Is this where we get that from? Because of the concept of uncleanliness?
I don't think so. I don't
No?
the semen would be unclean.
That's what I'm
Well,
asking, because I'm thinking about that, and this has been an excuse for that, forever in various different religions.
I think the idea was more of the spilling of the seed, right? That we got. in
Yeah,
the-
yeah.
Onan.
That's onanism, and we covered that. Although I
It's
missed
not
that.
really.
Apologies.
Yeah, that was a.
It's
Yeah, they
not
probably later
really. That
adapted
was.
it.
How
Yeah,
do
that
we
was.
determine whether
But if-
something is unclean?
If the
It's kinda
ancient
working
Jews
there,
found
too.
it icky.
If you have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
wash
so-
your hands, they're not clean.
So
Yeah,
you're
so
saying that gack is unclean because they
Oh,
would
most
find it icky.
definitely.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
there's
goodness.
two types of uncleanliness I think mostly in the Bible you'll find. One is like you have pure and impure animals, but those just mean that these are fit or to be eaten or permitted on the altar, and unclean means like they're unfit. Doesn't mean that you can't touch them. You can touch a pig and it won't make you impure. But the main type of spiritual purity, though, is more to do with like touching a dead body, and a dead human body in cause a more like strict type of like it takes longer to purify yourself or whatever compared to the dead body of an animal. And there's also like the dead body of a I think there are certain
We'll get to
animals
that in
are considered-
11. That chapter
Yeah,
11 talks about
we'll
all
get
the-
to it. Yeah.
I think
Um,
unclean means as much fit for food as anything else. Like vultures have an important part in the ecosystem, but you don't want to eat them.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the
So
next
there's
question
a
that I
difference
have.
between eating and the state of purity that you can't eat something.
There's
that's
there's an awful lot we could say about this, from a taxonomic point of view. There's no such thing as a pure animal. I could say that I'm a pure animal, but because I am an animal all the way, but I'm not really, because more than half of my cells are actually bacterial, if numerically listed. All right, and then the next question I have is, if you can't afford this animal, then show up with one of these. Either because I guess these are, if you can't afford this, you must be able to afford that. And it's a pigeon or a dove. A pigeon or a dove? The fuck is the difference?
turtle dove or a pigeon.
Right. So there's
Or-
actually an interesting
Oh,
reason
I
for
think
this.
I have a comment on this.
So
Hey,
this,
yeah.
yeah,
You
this-
have
Well,
one.
let Lawrence speak.
No. I know. Just wanted to see if I had one, but I'll let Lawrence, because I'm still waiting. Thank you very much.
We know.
So literally, so this has been taken variously, right? Like, if you're too poor to bring one thing, well, you could bring this other thing. Sometimes it has been understood as, well, if you if you don't have access to those things, well, you can just use the equivalent in or something, right? So So literally the expression according to the evaluation or assessed value in shekels of silver, according to the shekel of the sanctuary. So why this requirement is found only in the case of a Shem offering is the real question here. So to argue, as some do, that it is in order to avoid the offering of worthless animals does not settle this issue. The technical expression is mainly found in Leviticus 27, the law on the commutation of vows. On the basis of this observation, Spicer proposed in a 1960 study rendering this expression in 515 by convertible into shekels. This implies that according to verses 514 onwards, the ram required for the Hashem offering could be commuted to currency, which served then to buy the sacrificial ram. Spicer further drew a parallel between Leviticus 5 and documents from Nuzi or Mari presenting evidence of what he called ceremonial payment, in which certain obligatory fines or payments are imposed in terms of fixed animal ratios. Spicer's view was followed in particular by Milgrom. But the idea that the sacrificial ram would be brought by the officiating priest with the offerer's money is, so while it's ingenious, it has no support in the text itself. On the contrary, the formulation of the instruction to bring the animal in verse 15 is similar to that found elsewhere in Leviticus 4 through 5. And there is no reason to surmise that 515 does not intend a real ram. More likely, the presence of the technical phrase in 515 should be connected to the evolution of the Hashem offering, which was originally not a sacrificial offering, but a monetary compensation, possibly paid primarily in silver. Thus, Levine has proposed that the phrase should be considered an echo of the original nature of this offering, in order to make clear, when the ram was introduced, that it was equivalent to the former payment in silver.
I love the smell of indulgences in the morning. Although I have to say, the idea that, if you can't afford a ram, you can afford 2 turtle doves. If you can't afford 2 turtle doves, you can afford some flour. That does make sense. Even just think in our grocery bills. Red meat is more expensive than poultry, and all meat is more expensive than flour. So, generally speaking. So, it's a cheaper option for those who can't afford more expensive offerings to impress God about their sorriness with.
Yes. Cheaper an option when you can't afford more expensive things like, say, women.
Two things. The use of blood to make up for touching something unclean, like an unclean animal. I mean, blood is more unclean than touching something that, like a lobster or something like that, But then the other thing, we were talking about swearing in other parts of the Bible that we've been reading, and verse 4 is if you swear, pronouncing with lips anything that you're going to do anything evil or good, that is a sin. You need to make an offering. So, like, if I say I swear I swear by golly I'm gonna finish Leviticus, today, or not today, but because it's quite the chore, then that's a sin, right?
I think it's I think in this case it's talking more about stuff that you've done in the past, but you were unsure at the time that you swore that you were wrong. So you're like, I swear I had breakfast, and then later on you realize, well, I didn't have breakfast. Oh, that I sworn an oath.
So then you'd be forsworn, but I don't know if that's what it's talking about.
I think
you didn't make good on an oath.
It's all
that was my confusion too. If anyone thoughtlessly, and I think that's key, takes an oath to do anything, whether good or evil, in any matter one might carelessly swear about, and here they mention carelessly and thoughtlessly. So again, we're reiterating the same thing, even though they are unaware of it, but then they learn of it and realize their guilt. Well, now there has to be some kind of penance. But if they don't realize their guilt, was there ever a sin?
Well,
according to some interpretations, according to the first interpretation Lawrence presented, I am sinless.
The JPS translates it, or when a person utters an oath to bad or good purpose, whatever a man may utter in an oath, and though he has known it, the fact has escaped him, but later he realizes his guilt in any of these matters.
Right. So that was one of the ideas that was that Nihan directly addressed. He's like that that while grammatically possible, that's kind of a stretch. There is an easier explanation, which he gave.
Okay, so if a tree sins in the forest and never realizes it,
Well, you're not
We'll cut
guilty
it
if you
down.
don't realize it.
Consequences.
If you don't
for it.
feel guilt, I think the idea is if you don't feel guilt, then you don't have to bring a guilt.
isn't that shitty though? Think about that in terms of how people really are. We've seen people go to prison for a decade and come away saying that was a dumb law that they broke.
There
Never
is
having
actually-
there's never any admission of guilt. There's never any attempted apology. There's never any kind of compensation. There's never let's make this right. There's never an admission they did anything wrong. I did nothing wrong. All I did was steal thousands of documents that were perfectly mine to steal.
So
Yeah,
if-
the person
if-
who has 1/10 of 1 gram of a single piece of marijuana bud, he goes to prison for 35 years. So at least
minimum
that's not
sentencing is
once.
awesome. But if
They
we
said,
did
though,
if we did base our legal system on the Old Testament, as is commonly alleged by politicians, then a person would have to first realize they were guilty before they could be penalized.
No, psychopaths will
if
make
it
out
was-
like bandits.
Yeah,
Mhm.
this guilt offering is for like minor things that you yourself feel guilty about, and then a sin offering is more like if you have been found guilty of doing something which is illegal. If you didn't know that it was illegal at the time, then you only have to bring a sin offering.
Yeah, so I saw this thing recently where this guy put in prison for several years, like 8 years, for some violence that he performed on somebody else, and after 8 years in prison for ruining this other person's life. Bad that I didn't wear a mask.
You glitched.
You can't.
You
Yeah,
glitched.
you
Okay.
were cut off.
He said, "Well, I feel bad that I didn't wear a mask."
Oh,
The only-
so he wouldn't get caught.
Right. So he doesn't have any concern at all that he's ruined somebody else's life, or that he spent 8 years of his own life in prison over it. The only thing that he got caught.
the
That's it.
height of narcissism right there and self-worth. It's just unbelievable to me that people even
Yeah,
exist.
at first I thought you were referencing Dr. Hovind with the 8 years in prison and coming out saying I
Well,
broke
that
a
was
stupid
10
law.
years. Well, nine years plus. All right, I'm going to read a couple comments, but I was referencing him when coming out of prison saying that was a dumb law.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, he's a dumb guy.
ever any admission of guilt or error. There's never anything I regret that I did that, or I should have done that better, or I should apologize. That never happens.
Well, of the multiple laws he broke, he only admitted to the one that he could make sound the most ridiculous.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to read a couple comments here. Matt White says, Tomer, I've seen a quote stating that being left-handed, like me, is mentioned as a sin 25 times. Is this in Leviticus?
I have no idea I have no idea. I don't know if this is even true.
There is a biblical idea of that right being like doing things with your right hand is preferred.
Yeah, because it's like
I wanna
the-
preface
like,
that.
sitting on the
Basis for
right
that in the
hand
Bible.
of God and stuff. It's like the
Yeah.
official kind of.
Lawrence, is there nothing in there that says that being left-handed is a sin?
I
really thought
don't
there was.
remember
I don't
anything about
recall.
specifically being left-handed being a sin.
I never ran into it in the law, but I mean, Christians
There is
definitely.
sorry.
It might be
There
a,
is-
Sorry, Lawrence.
a
Sorry.
Roman thing.
Keep in
Being
mind
an
also
old
that-
guy, I can tell you that when I started school, they were still trying to do correctional treatment for left-handed people.
I'm pretty convinced that that's what happened to me.
Right.
because
So,
I'm
so I
ambidextrous.
don't think it's like a direct kind of being left-handed is bad. I think it's more of the association of things being at the right hand and being good. And the thing is, back in the day, like even now, I think most people are right-handed. Even it
not quite.
didn't matter. I mean, it didn't
Not
matter.
white.
Yeah, actually, there's a
said
lot. That's me. So there's a lot of people who actually are a lot more left-handed than people thought. And what we're noticing
Is it
now
the majority?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying like most. I'm not
I'm
saying
wrong.
like
I'm
More
wrong.
than half.
they don't.
I didn't mean to say it that way. I think what I meant was that it's more common now that people are recognizing that we've seen before. That's not more. I made a faux pas. I was going to add, though, real quick, if you don't mind me interrupting, that left-handedness was considered culturally across the world in multiple different places as a bad thing. Japan, for example, is a very good example of that historically. And there's even struggles with left-handed people today. You go in different parts of the world, you can hear records of this sort of thing, that people were treated badly, or they were forced, as Aaron said, to learn how to use your right hand instead of your left, and it kind of messed everything up. So I don't know about in the Bible directly that I've heard about it.
I know.
No, it's not. I don't think so.
I know that there is a character, a judge in the Bible, Ehud ben Gera, who is left-handed.
Yeah,
oh, the one who stabs the fat king
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it vanishes
And it
because he
plunges
had the...
in his stomach.
He had the
He
sword
is
on
And
the
it just
other
badass.
side.
He's such
Yeah,
a
I remember that one.
Man, that was
Be
a
able to draw his
a
sword.
weird chapter, that one. So yeah,
think it's a
I don't
Roman
think there's anything in
superstition.
the Bible that says that being left-handed is bad. I think it's the association with right-handedness being the norm is what caused people later to be like left-handed is bad.
In the medieval ages, I know that Christianity
Because
certainly
minorities always
you know,
bad.
yeah, obviously. It definitely used the Bible to, but it was one of those really weak, contrived. Honestly, the justification that I heard that made some sense was that in a lot of nations, shield walls and shield and sword fighting, if you have your shield in your offhand, left covers the heart and right doesn't, not as easily. So that made some sense, at least.
Okay, so I got a couple comments to read that I need to jump through before we get into the next chapter. Matt White says, I've seen a quote stating that being... Oh, wait.
You read that.
Yeah, sorry. M. Doug offers 10 pounds with a super sticker and says, thank you. Thank you very much, M. Doug. And then the trees. Look at the trees. Says, does anyone on the panel know why the great and terrible God created unclean animals in the first place? If he doesn't like them, why make them?
Somebody had to clean up the shit.
Yeah, I don't think it's he doesn't like them. It's more like these animals are fit to be eaten, and these animals are fit to be offered as sacrifice. But it's not like there's no use for that.
I have no issue with avoiding dung beetles.
But there are
Any
questions.
contact.
Why would God create mosquitoes, for example?
Now that was just a dick move.
Indeed, universal agreement.
So spiders can eat them, guys. That's it. You couldn't think of anything else that spiders could eat.
But the whole point of spiders, but
bats.
he only created the spiders to eat mosquitoes. So
yeah.
Exactly.
All right, so we are now jumping
My
into
commentary.
Oh fuck!
That's
I
right.
know.
You didn't say anything this whole time. Oh.
There's commentary.
All right, we're ready for you, Tomer.
Okay. I'll do... No, that's Mighty Chicken.
No,
That's Mighty
that's just
Chicken.
internal.
Poor guy.
Okay, I'll start. Verse 1. Okay.
Trevor and Wright says, what exactly is the meaning of the word sin in the Bible?
Oh,
There's
gosh.
a good question.
I've been wondering that for a while.
So
Transgression against God.
Yeah, it's a transgression. So initially, it would just mean like a wrongdoing, but when it translated as sin, it's specifically against like God or the law of God.
Okay, so there's no such thing then.
It's quite not complicated.
Well, there is that section that we read before where it talks about how a man could sin against another man.
Right, yeah, transgress.
So
Yeah,
then
well,
it's
yeah.
the definition of antisocial behavior as opposed to prosocial behavior.
Yeah, well, a lot of the time they make a distinction between like capital S sin and lowercase s sin. So, but like the general understanding of like words that are used for it, in their bare bones, their roots are like just words of wrongdoing. There's a whole field of theology called hamartiology, which is just like the study of sin and wrongdoing and stuff like that. Like I know that later theologians are like, well, they cause pain to God, and that I think is kind of out there. There's really not even like a shred of evidence for that, but they wanted to cope a little. So I would say that the difference between those two types of wrongs is the fact that you're breaking like like in one case it's more of like a social contract that you're breaking, and in another case it's more of the divine law.
To be fair to these verses, like not testifying when you could, maybe that is a bad thing. But a lot of the things that you had to atone for are silly. So, like, it seems like a racket for the priests to get and shekels.
Yeah, especially the way you can be guilty of something and not know it, and someone has to tell you, hey, by the way, I think you touched that thing and didn't wash your hand before you came into the temple, so we're going to need 30 shekels and a ram. Just saying.
I mean, that definitely, I have no doubt that was what it effectively was a lot of the time. But I feel the need to point out the distinction between a Christian view of sin, where if you get the hip pastor, he'll talk about how it's just missing the mark. It's like you shoot your arrow and you miss the mark. But simultaneously, he's ignoring the entire theological basis of that, which is that you have violated God. Not just the law of God fundamentally, and you deserve to die and burn in hell. Yeah. And the Jewish concept of sin and uncleanliness, which is doing something that might make you ceremonially unclean or might be against the rules, and you have to make a corrective action for, any normal thing.
There is the idea of like the whole thing with the sprinkling of the blood is supposed to be symbolic of you did a sin, you deserve to die, but instead you don't. God is merciful and doesn't kill you.
So you can transfer.
You bring an offering, and that's it. Yeah,
wow.
And so the spilling of the blood is kind of symbolic of that.
That for Christians especially, the reason why they would say that's missing the mark is because that's what the word means. Even like non-religious context, that's what the word means. You miss the mark.
And that's the origin of the English term. I do understand that, but that's in practical terms, that's the hip pastor trying to get in good with the kids by ignoring all of the actual horrific implications of his theology. But yeah, that's always fun. I've seen a lot of that. That's I'm gonna drink.
Okay, I'll start my commentary now.
Huzzah!
Yeah. Verse 1, a public charge. In Hebrew, kol Allah. The word Allah could mean swear or curse, as Vulgate, Ibn Ezra, and Milgrom suggests, based on verses where the root Aleph Lamed Hey has a connotation of curse giving. For example, 1 Samuel 14:24 and Numbers 5:21. These writings, however, are accompanied by an oath in the name of the Lord, and indeed, most Arab translations, Sifra and Rashi, interpret Allah to mean oath. According to Paran, the word could also mean treaty, as seen in Genesis 26:28 and Deuteronomy 29:13, since treaties included curses that would befall on that who violates them.
That's fun.
Yeah, they will be held responsible. In Hebrew, nasa avono. KJV reads, shall bear the iniquity, and JPS, he is subject to punishment. Paran comments, the phrase held responsible, nasa avin, has two opposing meanings. One, to forgive, as seen in Exodus 34:7, Numbers 14:18, and Micah 7:18. And two, he was guilty or he deserved punishment, Leviticus 17:16, Numbers 30:16, etc. The latter meaning is created through metonymy, where the word avin indicates both the sin and its result, i.e. the punishment. This is how Ibn Ezra interpreted Genesis 4:13. My avoni is too great, my punishment is too great. The Akkadian word alnu indicates both the sin and the punishment. This meaning is found in the priestly section of the Torah, excluding Ezekiel, who was a priest and was associated with the priestly literature, and a single mention in Isaiah 53:12. This meaning is not found outside the priestly section. The meaning of forgiveness is not found in the priestly section, and instead, the usual root samech lamed chet is given. In this verse, the meaning is to carry the guilt and be worthy of punishment.
Punish me, Daddy.
No, we're not going into that. Verse 3.
Do you mean? Oh. Did you say samach?
Samach. Salah.
Do you mean stuff?
No, samach.
What, for sin?
Ashkenazi Hebrew. No, samach lamed chet, to forgive.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were talking about I thought you said samach chet tet. Okay, yeah.
No, samach lamed chet.
Yeah,
Okay. Verse 3, human uncleanness. Levine comments, Hebrew tume'at adam, human impurity, refers to such forms of impurity as affect a woman after childbirth, 12:2, a person who experiences a bodily discharge, 15:2 and 19, or a man who has sexual intercourse with a menstruating woman, 1819. It also applies to a person who has eaten the meat of a dead animal or an animal torn by beasts in 17 verses 15 to 16. This category must be distinguished from the more severe impurity caused by contact with a corpse, Numbers 19:13, which caused a person
Have
to
you
be,
ever
quote,
eaten the flesh of a live animal?
So blood,
Um,
blood
I
is
think
purifying.
dead means
unless
like
it's
dead
dead
from
from
wait,
disease. as
I
opposed
haven't
to,
finished, please.
yeah.
Which caused a
There's the
person to
thing.
be, quote, defiled by a corpse, Hebrew tamel nefesh, the term used in Numbers 9:10.
Have you ever experienced
yeah.
a discharge?
Yes.
Yep.
Is that like daily? Is that like every time you blow your nose, or is it something more common than that?
I
It's
don't know.
normally a
Verse-
symptom of something
sorry.
else.
Oh,
Verse
so we're
6.
talking
Oh,
about like sneezing and blowing your nose and grossness.
No, no.
Indicative of no.
No.
Gesundheit.
I think we'll
Oh,
get to
never
that.
mind.
We'll
Yeah.
get to that. Verse 6. As a penalty for the sin, the Hebrew Bible literally reads, "And he brought his penalty to the Lord." The word for penalty, asham, is also used to do with the guilt offering in verse 15. Here it does not, however, refer to that, based on the differences between the two sacrifices. For example, in verse 6, a female from the flock is used, whilst in verse 15, it's a male from the flock.
What? You went a bit mumbled there.
Yeah. That's it. I think that was Paran. Just to differentiate between the some said
Yeah.
it's like the same sacrifice, but it's not. That's what I meant to say. Okay, verse 7. 2 doves or 2 young pigeons. Levine comments, the distribution of the 2 birds of the reduced chata'at, i.e. sin offering, is significant. One as to be offered as a chata'at and the other as an olah, burnt offering. The same distribution is prescribed in 15 verses 15 and 30 for instances of impurity. Ibn Ezra, later cited by Maimonides, explains this distribution as a way of compensating for the fatty portions of the sacrificial animals, which would have been burnt on the altar as God's share had the full chata'at been offered. By burning one of the birds to ashes, the share offered to God was at least increased. Verse 11, Levine comments, the quantity of flour used in this offering is equivalent to what is prescribed for the grain offering in 6:12 and Numbers 28:5. The usual embellishments of oil and frankincense prescribed for the grain offering in 2:1 and elsewhere are not included here. The same austerity is noticeable in the grain offering required of the wife suspected of infidelity in the Code of Numbers 5:15. Although this omission may be explained in part as a reduction in the cost of the offering, there is probably another factor involved. It was thought that God took no delight in receiving such offerings and would have preferred, so to speak, that they had not been necessary in the first place. Verse 15, when anyone is unfaithful to the Lord. KJV and JPS reads, if a soul or person commits a trespass. The word that is translated to trespass is ma'al. Milgrom comments, ma'al is the legal term for the wrong that is addressed by the asham offering, verses 15, 21, and Numbers 5:6. It is never defined in the Bible. Unfortunately, comparative philology is useless. Ibn Ezra suggests that because the nouns me'il and beket are synonyms for cloak and covering, their respective verbs may be denominatives, originally meaning cover one's deed or act deceitfully. As suggestive as this etymology is, it cannot be corroborated and, in particular, cannot shed light on the restricted technical use of ma'al in the cultic laws. The answer will have to be sought in the ma'al context. From the synonymous use of chilel, desecrate, in 1912, the use of ma'al in rabbinic texts and similar contexts in ancient Near Eastern documents, it will be shown that the noun ma'al means sacrilege. The verb ma'al means commit sacrilege, and all cases of ma'al fall into 2 major categories: sacrilege against sancta and sacrilege involving oaths. And finally, from verses 17 to 19, Bamberger comments, this paragraph is vague and perplexing. It seems to require an asham, guilt offering, for inadvertent offenses, such as chapter 4 proposes to expiate with a chata'at, sin offering. The rabbis gave a forced explanation. These verses, they say, apply to the individual who suspects, but is not sure of, having violated a law. And that's it for my commentary.
Okay, I've got one.
So even if you feel a twinge of guilt and you're not sure you did anything wrong, go ahead and make sacrifices.
And the actual that sacrifice is you have to pay is like a ram instead of like a goat or whatever, because it's almost like
the most important
it's
thing you can do
worse.
is just waste a life of an animal for no fucking reason.
Oh, Lilith, you're muted.
I said
Who's
it's
got
not
the birds?
Oh, that's me.
Yeah,
I
it might
said
be
it's
me.
not for no reason. It's because priests love barbecue.
Yeah.
But I have to say, it reminds me of this poor little Catholic girl I met who genuinely had been taught and believed that no sin would be forgiven unless it was confessed. So every night she'd try and think through anything she had done that might have required confession. Because if she didn't confess those to God, then they wouldn't be forgiven and she might have to go to purgatory.
Yeah, that's the best reason to be a priest, is to listen to these Catholic schoolgirls make their confessions.
Mm.
That's why the priest is in a separate room where you can't see what he's doing while he's listening.
Ugh.
Eric Wander says, question for Tomer, Isaac, and Lawrence. If you sin through ignorance, you have to kill a bullock, a ram, or a young female goat, like it says in Numbers 15. Is this contradictory or not?
What it shows is that there are two different traditions about this, not from a point of origin, but from rather the social circumstances. So after the after the exile, one of the ideas that was very prominent was this idea of a corporate personality, where one person can represent the whole community, and the whole community can stand in for one person. This is most clearly seen in the suffering servant stuff in Isaiah. And this idea in Numbers would be post-exilic, and the stuff that we are covering now is not necessarily post-exilic, and plus it's from a different it's from a different author altogether. So they could have had their own ideas about how guilt should be or how sacrifices should be done, or how guilt should be repaid for, and stuff like that. So you could view that as a contradiction, sure, but it's not really necessary if we consider the historical context.
It could also be Numbers 15 is like a general statement, no? Like it includes all of these different things that we're talking about. Some of them you have to do a bullock, some of them it's a ram, sometimes it's a female goat.
Yeah, there was this idea of because the one that's in Numbers 15 is like if you either unwittingly or unknowingly commit a sin, whether that be through ignorance or through I didn't know this was a sin, or something like that.
I
The
didn't
whole
know it was mixed fabric.
yeah, right. Yeah, I thought these were the same fabric. So you could easily view that as a contradiction. But
Well, bullocks.
like I said, if you put it in historical context, it might just be a change in the social dynamics.
Bullocks seem to be used for larger sins, such as the community will kill a bullock, and this will come to later, if someone is found murdered but they don't know who did it. But also, I could see it, hypothetically at least, as a way for the rich to show off how very, very rich and devout they were, because they could afford the bullock, and look at them. They're just so sorry.
Virtue signaling.
Yeah, not exactly a new concept in religion.
So, are we moving on to Leviticus 6?
Sure.
Yes.
All right, I will read. The Lord said to Moses, if anyone sins and is unfaithful to the Lord by deceiving a neighbor about something entrusted to them or left in their care, or about something stolen, or if they cheat their neighbor, or if they find lost property and lie about it, or if they swear falsely about any such sin that people may commit, when they sin in any of these ways and realize their guilt, They must return what they have stolen, or taken by extortion, or what was entrusted to them, or the lost property they found, or whatever it was that they swore falsely about. They must make restitution in full, add a fifth of the value to it, and give it all to the owner on the day they present their guilt offering. And as a penalty, they must bring to the priest, that is, to the Lord, because the priest is the Lord, or the Lord is the priest, or he's the representative. You know how it works. Their guilt offering, a ram from the flock, one without defect and of the proper value. In this way, the priest will make atonement for them before the Lord, because the priest can make an atonement if you give him enough food and enough resources, enough wealth, then sure, he'll put in a good word for you with God, because that's what priests do. Sorry, I'm embellishing there. In this way, the priest will make atonement for them before the Lord, and they will be forgiven for any of the things they did that made them guilty.
You can actually finish the chapter.
All right, that was the guilt offering, I think. And now
Yes.
we're going to move on to the burnt offering.
The overcooked offering.
Yay.
Extra rules about the burnt offering.
The Lord said to Moses, "Give Aaron and his sons this command. These are the regulations for the burnt offering. The burnt offering is to remain on the altar hearth throughout the night till morning, and the fire must be kept burning on the altar. We like it well done. The priest shall then put on his linen clothes with linen undergarments next to his body, and shall remove the ashes of the burnt offering that the fire has consumed on the altar, and place them beside the altar. Then he is to take off these clothes and put on others, and carry the ashes outside the camp to a place that is ceremonially clean. The fire on the altar must be kept burning. It must not go out. Every morning, the priest is to add firewood and arrange the burnt offering on the fire and burn the fat of the fellowship offerings on it. The fire must be kept burning on the altar continuously. It must not go out. I know you can't stoke a fire on the Sabbath, but on this Sabbath, you're stoking that fucking fire. This cannot go out. And now we'll move to the grain offering. These are the regulations for the grain offering. Aaron's sons are to bring it before the Lord in front of the altar. But if this was thousands of years later and they're dead, I guess we don't have to fucking worry about this shit anymore. Sorry. Minor outburst. The priest is to take a handful of the finest flour and some olive oil and popeye, together with all the incense and the grain offering, and burn it on the memorial portion of the altar as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. And if you get enough of it, you get a bit of a buzz out of it too. Aaron and his son shall eat the rest of it, but it is to be eaten without yeast in the sanctuary area. They are to eat it in the courtyard of the tent of the meeting. It must not be baked with yeast. I told you I told you that I'm. What is that word?
Lactose intolerant.
No.
Celiac.
I had it.
Celiac.
Lactose.
Celiac.
Celiac disease.
What? Fuck.
Okay, never mind. Keep
Remember.
going.
Yeah. I had it, and then Tomer spoke. But anyway, Aaron and his sons shall eat the rest of it, but it is to be eaten without yeast in the sanctuary area. They are to eat it in the courtyard of the tent of meeting. It must not be baked with yeast. I have given it as their share of the food offering presented to me, like the sin offering and the guilt offering. It is most holy. Any male descendant of Aaron may eat it. Fuck those chicks, though. For all generations to come, it is his perpetual share of the food offerings presented to the Lord. Whatever touches them will become holy.
Oh.
They have the Midas touch.
They can use these offerings to sprinkle on, say, an unclean animal and make it holy.
Gluten-free. That's what I was looking for.
Oh,
I
I didn't see lactose intolerant. I'm so stupid.
said something stupid earlier. Till
Okay.
you're fine.
Okay,
This is
never
the
mind.
day
Keep
of
going.
stupid.
Never mind about
The
that.
Lord also said to Moses, because all of these things are terribly important and these need to be recorded for thousands of years, everything that Aaron and his sons do. And now we've extended it so that Aaron and his sons just go perpetually to where anybody can just claim to be Aaron's sons, because how are we going to know? The Lord also said to Moses, this is the offering Aaron and his sons are to bring to the Lord on the day he is anointed, 1/10 of an ephah of the finest flour, because it's got to be the good shit, as a regular grain offering. Regular grain offering, as in do it every week. Half of it in the morning and half of it in the evening. It must be prepared with oil on a griddle. Bring it well mixed and present the grain offering with just a little bit of spice. But just not too much, because this shit goes a long way.
These sound like pancakes.
We'll get to that.
We will.
Yes.
We will.
Present the grain offering broken in pieces as an aroma pleasing to the Lord. And this all again translates to me that spirit is air. All of these pleasing aromas and everything, this is all air. The son who is to succeed him as an anointed priest shall prepare it. It is the Lord's perpetual share and is to be burnt completely. Every grain offering of a priest shall be burnt completely. It must not be eaten. Now, let's talk about the sin offering. The Lord said to Moses, and we only know this because Moses said so, or somebody pretending to write for Moses, was pretending to say so. Say to Aaron and his sons, these are the regulations for the sin offering. The sin offering is to be slaughtered before the Lord in the place the burnt offering is slaughtered. It is most holy. The priest who offers it shall eat it. It is to be eaten in the sanctuary area, in the courthouse, in the tent of the meeting. Whatever touches any of the flesh will become holy. You drop this in the outhouse becomes holy, even that part.
You.
Holy outhouse.
You.
And if any of the blood is spattered on a garment, you must wash it in the sanctuary area. But if the flesh touches something, it becomes holy. Never mind. The clay pot the meat is cooked in must be broken, because we don't recycle here. But if it is cooked in a bronze pot, the pot is to be scoured and rinsed with water. Any male in a priest's family, any priest, may eat it. It is most holy. But any sin offering whose blood is brought into the tent of meeting to make atonement in the holy place must not be eaten. It must be burnt up.
Okay, so do you want me to comment it, or do you want me? Do you want other?
I just want to soak
I
in
can't
how
speak.
stupid all of this is for a moment.
I have one thing I want to think. Maybe you guys can help me on this. What's God's problem with yeast?
We've
It's
already
not
covered
yeast.
this previously.
It's not
I don't
yeast.
remember.
It's
I might not have
leaven.
been there for that day. That's my question.
Yes,
Yeah.
And,
Oh, yeah.
It's not yeast. It's chametz, which means unleavened, or
No,
yeah, no,
leaven.
sorry, the chametz is leavened.
Right.
Yeah, sorry,
Why does he
leavened.
want unleavened bread, though? So therefore, has
Because
he
he's jealous of anything that's lighter and fluffier than he is.
I was thinking the
As,
same thing.
I mentioned previously that as I think Milgrom said that it could be that they associated leavened with fermentation, decay, and death. So
Also
Um,
haughtiness. No?
I was thinking maybe that he wanted to constantly remind you that he brought you out of Israel and they didn't have time to wait for the bread to rise. They had to leave so quickly.
That could be it.
I would
That could
think
be
that
it.
it partially has to do with the fact that it's much you can carry a lot more unleavened bread.
I see.
When
Okay.
bread rises, it's because of air pockets, and since God himself is air, that would make it cannibalism.
I mean, it's possible that the story of the Exodus is derived from the festival of eating unleavened bread, which was derived from this idea that unleavened bread is holy, rather
see.
than the other way around.
I could see that, or at least parts of it. I have no doubt it came in with some other, myths and part remembered history. But yeah, that makes sense. At least folding that part of it in. But yeah, it's possible. I mean, it makes more sense to me, at least in those days, that there might have been more of like a fermented sourdough riser kind of a thing than, traditional yeast that we might have now. So that does make some sense with fermentation and whatnot.
Leaven
Yeah.
symbolizes sin, corruption at work.
Symbolism
corrupts
doesn't
by
actually matter
puffing up.
for.
It's normally
That doesn't
traditionally considered symbolic of haughtiness, not of sin in general.
Yeah.
By like
But
being
that does make sense what you were saying, because
relentless.
if you think about it, the Middle East, they don't really known for, loaves of bread. They're actually more known for flatbreads.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. But
I mean,
I
flatbread is
believe
still leavened, but
I believe
it's still-
P-Town is referencing Jesus again, but actually he uses it as an analogy in several different ways, including referring to the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which was their teachings, not necessarily sin in an abstract sense. Although we obviously they're set up as an antagonist with their teachings
It could
being
be their
antagonistic
additions
to
to the
Jesus.
law, sort of.
Yeah.
Somebody asks P-Town, says, I could barely hear. What do you mean the yeast is sin?
It symbolizes sin, but pride, like puffing up, being, I don't know, like
We know.
arrogant.
Yeah, pride, arrogance is different from sin, but yeah, there is a tradition of it being symbolic of pride and.
All right, Tomer.
Oh,
are we
okay,
done with
so-
this one, or are we going to move on to the next?
No. I have my commentary, but I did find Milgrom's comment on the unleavened thing. So he says,
Oh, let's hear
this, this requirement follows logically from the fact that, quote, I have assigned it as their portion from my food gifts, end quote, in verse 10. Thus, because the cereal offering stems from God, leaven being forbidden on the altar into leaven, it follows that the priest should also eat it unleavened. This requirement is not found in the prescription for the raw cereal offering in 2 verses 1 to 3, and it may account for the omission of the baked offering in this pericle. For we have already been informed that the baked cereal offering must be unleavened in 2 verses 4 to 5. The repetition of the ostensibly superfluous verb te'achel, shall be eaten, throws emphasis on the state of the consumed mincha. It must be unleavened. The third mention of this verb the first mention of this verb in the verse is also for emphasis. It must be eaten in the sanctuary court.
Okay, but it still doesn't say why it needs to be unleavened in that. It just says it has to be this, it has to be this, it has to be this. So that's kind of my argument, is what's the point of that? Besides the cultural thing, like Lorence said, and that's true. I mean, they still have leavening, but a lot of it is flatbread. Why does that matter?
Oh, I think because... this.
I know I'm trying to ask
We're
questions about
talking
things
about
that I can't answer.
I know what you're. I think we've talked about
Yeah.
this already on 2:11, and that's where it refers to, if I'm not
I see.
mistaken.
I mean, the act when you prepare bread, right? If you want it to leaven, you normally you put it in a warm place, you cover it with a cloth, and it becomes
I make bread
bigger.
every couple of weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, so it grows in size, and so I think there seems to have been some sort of like symbolism that bread that has grown. Is
Yeah,
like
as I
faulty and
said,
unfit for
Yeah,
ritual purposes.
oh my god, I'm sorry that they interrupt.
Because God doesn't like it.
That's cool.
Okay,
Neat.
first of all, I'm sorry, Isaac, that I interrupted you. I just wanted to say that this again, what Milgrom states in I think it was my commentary on this one, that it symbolizes fermentation, decay, and death. But never mind about that. Okay, so my commentary. Verses 2 to 7. Levine comments, verses 2 to 7 comprise laws about the expiation of false oaths involving deceitful acts of theft, robbery, fraud, and so on, which cause actual loss of property to another. These parallel with respect to crime. with respect to crimes, quote, between man and man, end quote, the provisions of 5 verses 14 to 16 regarding the inadvertent misappropriation of sanctuary property, but with an important difference. The offenses outlined here were quite definitely intentional. A person misappropriated property or funds entrusted to his safekeeping, or defrauded another, or failed to restore lost property he had located. As there were no witnesses to the crime, the usual laws of testimony were not applicable. When sued, the defendant lied under oath and claimed no responsibility. Without witnesses, the aggravated party had no further recourse and sustained an irretrievable loss. Verse 9, the regulations for the burnt offering. In
I
Hebrew,
just want to
Torah-
say, sorry,
Okay.
on the previous section,
Sure.
before we get too far away, like these are actually good laws that you have to make restitution and pay an additional fine to the injured party, not just to the priest. This is one of the ways in which I think Judaism is better than Christianity, because it says you have to go make it up in real practical terms to the person you screwed over. You know, you can't just go make confession, pay off the priest, and fuck off and leave them in the dirt. So,
Okay.
By the way, it's a double tithe. Instead of 10, it's 20%. Just random comment.
Okay. Verse 9, the regulations for the burnt offering. In Hebrew, Torat Ha'olah. KJV reads the law of the burnt offering, and JPS the ritual of the burnt offering. Levine comments, the key term in chapters 6 to 7 is Torah, which requires clarification precisely because the more general term Torah, in capital T, is so familiar. Hebrew Torah derives from the verb yud resh hey, to cast or shoot, an arrow, for instance, in Exodus 15:3 and 2 Kings 13:17. The verb in the hif'il form, hora, means to aim or direct toward, hence to show the way or instruct, as seen in 2 Kings 12:3. As used here, Torah signifies the content of the instruction. Frequently reference is to priestly instruction, including what the priests have been taught, as well as what they, in turn, teach the Israelite people regarding the performance of religious rituals. It is a term that appears throughout the priestly writings of the Bible. Verse 11, whatever touches them will be holy. Levine comments, similar statements pertaining the sanctity of the altar occur in Exodus 29:37 and 30:39 and in verse 27. The problem of interpretation concerns the verb yikdash. Does it mean will become holy as a result of contact with sanctified substances and objects, or must be in a holy state before being allowed to come into contact with sacred substances and objects? Several scholars, most notably Menachem Haran, have argued for the former interpretation. Haran has formulated a theory of contagious, quote-unquote, holiness, according to which the sanctity of holy objects and substances is communicated or conducted to all that comes into contact with them.
does that mean if the holy flesh touches something it's not supposed to, and that thing is made holy, you need to burn it?
I think so.
Great! Burn everything! Burn it all!
But that
Okay.
does lead to
Sorry.
some problems when you do think about logic, though. So, you know, that could lead to a number of issues. I'm not going to get into it. Just
Yeah,
keep going.
there is
Please.
some like weird parallels about like something becomes holy and then you need to purify it
Right.
to remove the holiness which is impure. It's like, oh, a bit weird.
Yeah.
Like
Verse-
in
It makes
vessels.
more sense when you think that you're dealing in blood magic. So,
Verse 13, a regular grain offering. The problem with this verse is that the grain offering, which is presented on the day of Aaron's initiation, is called a regular tamid offering. Texts from the Second Temple period, like Sirach 45:14, Mishnah Menachot 4, sections 5 and 6, section 2, and Josephus in Antiquities 4:10-7 indicate that this was a daily grain offering which was presented by the high priest as a sacrifice. Furthermore, as Levine notes, a grain offering was ordained as part of the initiation of the priesthood in 8 verses 26-28, but the ingredients are different from what's specified here. Ibn Ezra tried to solve this problem by reading the bet in Beyom Himashachoto, on the day he is anointed, as from, and so it'll read from the day he is anointed. Maimonides in Mishneh Torah Vessels of the Sanctuary 5:16 writes that writes that 8:26-28 concern their singular offering of the high priest when he is initiated, and this passage deals with the regular incense offering presented by the high priest. Levine, however, writes, these attempted resolutions fall short, however, because verse 22 of our chapter states that each successive high priest was to make the same grain offering, which seems to mean that the initiation rite was was permanent, not that the grain offering was to be a regular feature of this public cult. Furthermore, we are still left with difference in content between this grain offering and what is ordained in 8 verses 26-28. It is likely that these are parallel traditions on the investiture of the high priest. Our rite became the pattern for the daily grain offering of the high priest, whereas that of chapter 8 remained associated specifically with his investiture.
Yeah, and on that, actually, so verses 12 through 16 here are usually seen as secondary as well. So there does seem like, why would you divide two sections on grain offerings like that? First of all, it just sounds kind of weird. Like, you can just introduce the rest of the grain offering like with the preceding section. So from Nahan here, as regards Leviticus 6:12-16, it is only very loosely connected with the issue of the disposal of sacrificial remains. Rather, the Torah Torah for the cereal offering in 6:7-11 was the obvious opportunity to introduce this new instruction, of which nothing was said earlier in Exodus 25-40 or in Leviticus 1-5. Also on that, the assumption against the original character of 6:12-16 can be supported by noting that all of this section is missing in one of the main testimonies of the Greek tradition, the Codex Alexandrinus.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, that does come, far later, but the Codex Alexandrinus is from like around, was it 400? Around the year 400, maybe a little earlier, but yeah, it is quite late. But the fact that it's missing in that codex, pretty important one, because it's like a complete one that we have essentially, which is pretty fucking cool. Might stand to its secondary nature, or it could be an effect of I guess it would be like an eye skip, like, because these sections are so similar. Let's see, in verses 12 and 17, yeah, and the Lord spoke to Moses saying, this is the offering Aaron and his sons, yeah, which is the exact same thing as happened that is
Where you have the same words and you jump to the next
yeah,
occurrence of the same words.
which is totally
That,
possible.
I mean, that kind of mistake, that kind of eye skipping mistake has led to some of the funniest errors in copies of the Bible.
Yeah.
Bart Ehrman always talks about his favorite where the
genealogies.
the genealogy in Luke, which is reversed to try and cover up the fact that it's not the same as Matthew. But where it was like so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, the son of so-and-so, and it was originally columns, but the guy read it across as, and then, so it was God, the son of Methuselah, the son of, Adam, the son of, it was just like God was somewhere in the middle there. And admittedly, that one was funny. So it's, I gotta feel for some scribes, particularly on, if I had to copy this out by hand, my God, I'd be lucky if I only made an eye skip.
I think we have some comments.
So I think, so what you're referring to is minuscule 109, where God is the son of Aram, and the source of the race is fairies.
I'll just quickly finish my comments. It's only 2 comments. Verse 14, verse 21, broken in pieces. In Hebrew, tufinei, which is a hapax. The meaning of this word is not clear. The Septuagint reads kneaded or rolled. The Peshitta describes it as broken in pieces, possibly from the root pei taf taf. Rashi, Rashbam, and Ibn Ezra render to bake from the root aleph pei hey. According to Milgrom, the word tapini means a cereal preparation in Akkadian and barley bread in Hittite. And finally, on 29, Milgrom comments, Ostensibly, this statement contradicts the previous one that only the officiating priest shall eat it in verse 26. The contradiction evaporates as soon as one realizes that although the officiating priest who manipulates the blood does indeed receive the prebend, he may, if he so desires, distribute it among his fellow priests. This interpretation is supported by the extended range of the verb achal, which means not only eat, but also enjoy or benefit, as seen in Psalms 128:2 and Ecclesiastes 5:18. The alternative possibility must also be entertained that the conflicting verses represent two variant traditions, the small sanctuary with its single priest in verse 26, and the Jerusalem temple with its priestly Keter in verse 29. This supposition also explains a similar difference between the priestly recipients of the raw and cooked cereal offerings and the breast and right thigh of the well-being offering. And that's it for my comment on this chapter.
Way. Well, at least God likes the smell of freshly baked bread. I can't blame him for that.
I have one comment. I just don't know what the verse number is. What's verse 21?
28, I think, because
Okay,
it's
so verse
a
28,
gap of
it's-
9.
Oh, okay.
7,
Verse-
sorry,
verse-
it's a gap of 7.
Okay, so verse 28 says if it's an earthen vessel, then you have to break it, and if it's metal, you scour it, which like pour boiling hot water on it. So the difference is that the idea is that the earthenware absorbs whatever is inside, and there's no way of getting it out, so you have to destroy the vessel, and can't use it for anything else.
Kind of like
And if
Tupperware
it's
when you
in-
make spaghetti in it, and then it just ends up being pink forever after that.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think it's only like metal vessels you can pour boiling hot water on them, and whatever it might be absorbed will come out. And this is a practical application in like kosher laws, because in kosher laws, if like a vessel is being used with non-kosher food or whatever, you can make it kosher by if it's metal, by scouring it with boiling hot water, and then it becomes kosher again.
It's unfair that so many Jews have to break plates, because nowadays we do have glazes that are essentially, that do prevent fired earthenware from absorbing things that maybe they didn't have the same level of glazes back then. But yeah, there's a lot of smashing dishes and burying the shards.
I don't know if it happens that often. It's more like if you can kosher certain things and some things you can't, so you just get rid of them. Really,
I worked in I did like a catering side job when I was in school.
Yeah.
At one point, and we went to a Hanukkah thing, and we were allowed to eat some of the leftovers, and some guy got the square plate to put his cream cheese bagels and lox on, and they were like, "You realize that's a meat plate? We have to break it now." Even though they had the industrial kitchen where they could have gone for the super hot, burn it.
Even though, right, because it was clay or earthenware or China or whatever, like
So
there's
it's
no.
you cost us a plate. We have to smash.
I don't think you
that,
have to
bury
break it. I think you can just throw it out or
And-
give it away. Like
No,
you just can't use
they
it.
said they had to smash it. I don't know. I was not.
You have to smash the
It's
dishes
probably a
and crack the
tradition, but
plates,
I
because that's what
haven't
Bilbo
had
Baggins hates.
Yeah, me neither. I don't think I've heard of it either.
It must be a tradition for some people to smash it. It's like,
Like
it
the
says you
Greeks?
should in the verse. So let's,
That reminds me of like
Yes.
little children having to walk on the edges of the streets, on the cracks.
The
You
bodies
can't actually
would
walk
be
on anything else.
No,
You
you
have to
can't
stay on
innocent
the
and shit by
cracks.
that.
No,
Don't
you
step on the
you can't
cracks,
step
or
on
you'll
the
break
crack.
your mother's back.
Yeah, we get it.
All right, I'm going to read some comments here.
before-
Pablo's
Sorry, Aaron. Just asking real quick before we read the comments. Could we have time to read chapter 7 or maybe extend, because these like 5 to 7 are like a unit on their own, and I think
You
that
should be
Okay,
able to.
sure. Yeah,
We
we can
got-
do that.
okay.
All right,
Just
so Pavilas Lazovskis says, just a random thought. Could risen dough be seen as unholy because leavening makes dough become larger and be seen as some kind of food multiplying miracle?
Well, I think that would be unlikely, because they wouldn't use. If that was the case, they probably wouldn't use such a story for. They probably wouldn't use that as a baseline for a story, like Jesus and the feeding of the 5,000, right?
Or Elijah.
Yeah,
And
or
the
Elijah.
widow's mite.
Yeah, considered
Yes.
unholy for sure.
So I wouldn't think that they considered that being the reason.
Okay. Zarnarnkar says, I thought holiness was good. I'm surprised they aren't worshiping the holy things. At least that's what some Christians would do today. Sounds like the Hebrews had a different view.
Oh yeah, I did forget about that. So more or less, the whole idea of like why they break like these things became holy. So it's kind of like it says you can't, any of the food that gets left over must be burnt. You can't eat it. So it's kind of the same idea, like the anything that gets absorbed into your clothing or a vessel or whatever. It's kind of like the leftovers. So it's
Gotcha.
It's holy, but you can't derive any pleasure from it.
Then Trevor Wright says, to what extent did the way of observing the Torah change from the tabernacle to the temple between the Pharisee and the high priest of rabbinic Judaism during Jesus' time?
Oh boy. So
Mostly everything is replaced by prayers.
by prayers, and they let you start doing some things can be done at home, right? Like communal meals as well, which would be done at the temple, would be done at home. But yeah,
also,
so
like-
but like when it comes to like the tabernacle, if we're talking about like the story itself, then like I mean the differences are I mean you can just like we already read stuff on that, so we can
Yeah, we mentioned there are like parallels between the synagogue and the temple. I mean, even Reform Judaism, they call their synagogues temples. There's a lot of parallels in the architecture and the structure and the services that are done parallel the service in the temple. But they don't. The priests don't officiate.
And then the thing is, by the time that we get to Jesus, the interpretations have gone so far out of the bounds that was part of the what's the word I'm looking for? Part of the reason why Jesus felt the need to speak up against it, because he was like, no, you guys have gone too far off the rails. Like, you have interpreted it in this way, but it should be interpreted this other way. So quite a few things changed.
Would have been before the destruction of the temple, and they didn't really have synagogues or churches at that point. It's almost like Judaism, rabbinical Judaism, and Christianity kind of both evolved from a shared ancestor, which you could call like Second Temple Judaism, and they both kind of had to establish this idea of communal services and leadership and prayers and stuff. They both kind of developed them in parallel, and I'm sure they each had influence on each other.
Oh yeah.
All right, are we ready for the guilt offering?
Yes.
The guilt offering. These are the regulations for the guilt offering, which is most holy. The guilt offering is to be slaughtered in the place where the burnt offering is slaughtered, and its blood is to be splashed along the sides of the altar. All its fat shall be offered, and it's the fat tail and the fat covers of the internal organs, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the long lobe of the liver, which is to be removed with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as a food offering presented to the Lord. It is a guilt offering. Any male in a priest's family may eat it, but it must be eaten in the sanctuary area. It is most holy. The same law applies to both the sin offering and the guilt offering. They belong to the priest who makes atonement with them. The priest who offers a burnt offering for anyone may keep its hide for himself. Every grain offering baked in an oven or cooked in a pan on a griddle belongs to the priest who offers it. And every grain offering, whether it is mixed with olive oil or dry, belongs equally to all the sons of Aaron. The fellowship offering. These are the regulations for the fellowship offering anyone may present to the Lord. If they offer it as an extension of thankfulness, then along with this thank offering, they are to offer thick loaves made without yeast, gluten-free, and with olive oil mixed in. Thin loaves
Flatbread
made
bread.
without yeast and brushed with oil, since we haven't figured out butter yet. And thick loaves of the finest flour, well kneaded with the oil mixed in, where the mutton is really lean. I love that. Along with their fellowship offering of the Thanksgiving, which isn't going to happen for a long time, they are to present an offering of thick loaves of bread made with yeast.
What?
They are to bring one of each kind as an offering, a contribution to the Lord. It belongs to the priest who splashes the blood of the fellowship offering against the altar. The meat of their fellowship offering of thanksgiving must be eaten on the day it is offered, because that shit goes bad. And they must leave none of it till morning. So this is a feast. If, however, their offering is the result of a vow or is a free will offering, the sacrifice shall be eaten on the day they offer it, but anything left over may be eaten on the next day, because reasons. Any meat on the sacrifice left over till the third day must be burnt up. If any meat of the fellowship offering is eaten on the third day, the one who offered it will not be accepted. It will not be reckoned to their credit, for it has become impure. The person who eats any of it will be held responsible until they figure out how to make it a refrigerator. Meat that touches anything ceremonially unclean must not be eaten. It must be burnt up. As for any other meat, anyone ceremonially clean may eat it. But if anyone who is unclean eats any meat of the fellowship offering belonging to the Lord, they must be cut off from their people. Anyone who touches something unclean, whether human uncleanliness or an unclean animal or any unclean creature that moves along the ground, and then eats any of the meat of the fellowship offering belonging to the Lord, must be cut off from their people. Now, eating fat and blood forbidden. The Lord said to Moses, "Say to the Israelites, do not eat any of the fat of the cattle, sheep, or goats. The fat of an animal found dead or torn by wild animals may be used for any other purpose, but you must not eat it. Anyone who eats the fat of an animal from which the food offering may be presented to the Lord must be cut off from their people. And wherever you live, you must not eat the blood of any bird or animal, because birds somehow are not animals in this reality. Anyone who eats blood must be cut off from their people." Englishmen.
Yeah, Britain is fucked.
The Lord said to Moses, and now we're getting into the priest's share, "Say to the Israelites, anyone who brings a fellowship offering to the Lord is to bring part of it as their sacrifice to the Lord. With their own hands they are to present the food offering to the Lord. They are to bring the fat together with the breast and wave the breast before the Lord as a wave offering." See what I got here? Yeah. "The priest shall burn the fat on the altar, but the breast belongs to Aaron and his sons. You are to give the right thigh of your fellowship offerings to the priest as a contribution. The son of Aaron who offers the blood and the fat of the fellowship offering shall have the right thigh as his share. From the fellowship offerings of the Israelites, I have taken the breast that is waved and the thigh that is presented, and have given them to Aaron the priest and his sons as their perpetual share from the Israelites. This is the portion of the food offerings presented to the Lord that were allotted to Aaron and his sons on the day that they were presented to serve the Lord as priests. They get all the best meat. They get all the best bits. They get all the money. They get all the raiment. They get all the jewels in their clothing. They serve me, so they deserve a lot more shit. On the day they were anointed, the Lord commanded that the Israelites give this to them as their perpetual share for the generations to come, because that's the most wicked racket you could have. These, then, are the regulations for the burnt offering, the grain offering, the sin offering, the guilt offering, the ordination offering, and the fellowship offering, which the Lord gave Moses at Mount Sinai in the desert of Sinai on the day that he commanded the Israelites to bring their offerings to the Lord.
Okay, I have two comments slash questions on this. One, this is the priest's job, which means that not only the priest, but their entire family, wives, children, slaves, were supposed to be sustained off of this. But it says so often that this or that thing can only be eaten by the priest and his sons. And in some cases, that they could only be eaten in the most holy place where only the priests are allowed to go for specific rituals. So I'm wondering what their wives are allowed to eat, if anything, because you can't starve them to death. And the other thing is, like with the leftovers and the different ceremonies and rituals, I'm wondering how much of this is a case of, how long after did someone get food poisoning, and then that declares how long after you can eat it.
Right. But there's also the tithes and stuff, which so there's certain things that only the men could eat, and things that anyone could eat.
Yeah, the good stuff.
This is much too good for mere women.
Okay, I'll start my commentary. Verses 1 to 7. Paran comments, the law regarding the guilt offering, Asham, were given in chapter 5, but it didn't describe how it should be sacrificed, only the circumstances of offering it. Here, the missing is completed, and details regarding its sacrifice are given. Regarding the way of the sacrificing, it turns out that it is like the fellowship offering, Ha-Yamim, because its blood was sprinkled against the sides of the altar, and its fat is burnt on it. However, in other details, the guilt offering is similar with the sin offering, the Chata'at. It is a part of the most holy, and only the male priests ate the flesh in a sacred area. Verse 8, Levine comments, Chapter 1, which sets forth the procedures relevant to the burnt offering, meticulously avoids mentioning that the hide of the sacrificial animal should be burnt because, in fact, it was not to be destroyed. Only in the case of the priestly Chata'at ordained in 4 verses 1 to 21 and in similar riddance rituals was the hide to be destroyed, and that was done outside the camp, not on the altar. In most cases, the officiating priest could keep the hide as his own and profit from its value. Verses 9 to 10. Paran comments, Scripture repeats the distinction between the different grain offerings. One offering is brought to the temple after it was cooked or fried, and the other includes the rest of the grain offerings, which were brought without any early preparation by the fire. These two offerings are separated from each other even by their way of distribution. The grain of the first kind is given, quote, to the priest who offers it, unquote, whilst the other grain offerings, in plural, were given, quote, to the sons of Aaron all alike, end quote. Some, however, suggest that verse 10 is a generalization, and its purpose is to say that all the types of grain offerings, those with oil and those who are dry, were given to all priests, meaning to every priest that served in the temple at that time.
So, like, whoever was on shift kind of a thing? Or just whoever was...
Yeah, apparently the priests would have a shift over during the year where they would officiate in the temple, and it would be something like 2 weeks a year.
Oh.
So during the rest of the year, they would sustain themselves on like the I can't remember. So the tithes there's two different types of like tithes, right? There's like the 10th portion, and there's like another one, like an additional tithe. I don't know what that's called.
Yeah, I know that there's a 10th
Maser,
portion given at... Yeah.
There's also what's called the Troma. I don't know what the English equivalent is, but there's also there's certain things that the priests kind of get all the time, and then only the officiating priests kind of get the meat of the sacrifices, really.
Like the fellowship offerings here or whatnot.
Yeah.
Verse 12, a thank offering. In Hebrew, Zevach HaTodah. Milgrom comments, This was the original name of the sacrifice before it was subsumed in P under the Shelamim. Yet the tradition that the Zevach Todah is an independent offering, which must be distinguished from the Zevach Shelamim, is firmly anchored in all sources but P, 22 verses 21 to 29, which are from H, not P, Jeremiah 17:26, 2 Chronicles 29 verses 31 to 33, and even in rabbinic sources like the Mishnah Zevach 5, sections 6 to 7. The uniqueness of this Thanksgiving offering is extolled by the rabbis when they claim that it is, quote, never brought for sin, end quote, in Leviticus 9:1, and that, quote, in the world to come, all the sacrifices will be annulled, but that of the Thanksgiving will not be annulled, and all prayers will be annulled, but that of the Thanksgiving will not be annulled, end quote, in Leviticus 9:7.
Because I'm happy.
Wait, all the sacrifices will be annulled, except for the
Except-
Thanksgiving.
Except for Thanksgiving.
But
So there will
prayers
be
is
no
the same?
sin, and everyone will be thankful.
And the
Prayers will
same
not
with
be
the prayers.
Yes.
Like,
prayers
you
will be
still-
annulled, sorry.
So there'll be thankful thankful sacrifices, and thankful prayers. I thought the whole idea is that, the prayers replace the sacrifice. So if you're going to bring sacrifices again, why do you need the prayers as well?
The point is there will be only thanking. Nothing else will be allowed.
I get that.
Thank the dear leader
Funny.
every day. No other thoughts. Only thankful. Only joy all the time.
Yeah, thanks. I'll pass.
Verse 16, a vow, Hebrew neder. Milgrom comments, the votive offering is brought following the successful fulfillment of a vow. That is, a well-being offering is vowed to God if a prayer is answered. The bringing of the sacrifice is termed shilem neder, pay or fulfill a vow. Thus, Absalom says to David in 2 Samuel 15, verses 7 to 8, quote, let me go to Hebron and fulfill the vow that I made to the Lord, for your servant made a vow when I lived in Geshur of Aram. If the Lord ever brings me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord, end quote. Or Proverbs 7:14, quote, I am obligated to sacrifice a well-being offering, for today I have fulfilled my vows, shilamti nadarai, end quote. And the free will offering, in Hebrew nedava, Paran comments, unlike the vow, neder, and the thank offering, todah, which are brought after a person wants something from the hands of God, the free will is an offering which a person brings from generosity. It is less valuable than the vow offering. 2 blemished species of the cattle sacrifices are allowed, but sometimes the line between the vow and the free will is blurred, and the vow could sometimes be called a free will, as seen in Deuteronomy 23:24. Moreover, the vow and free will sacrifices appear next to each other several times, like in 22:18 and 21, 23:38, and Numbers 15:3, etc.
So the free will offering is like the virtue signal offering, I guess.
I just want to share with God because I'm just so generous, and the priests and I.
So blessed, so blessed.
So blessed.
Verses 22 to 27, Milgrom comments, this long introduction is a sign of an insert that severed the original continuous passage on the Thanksgiving and well-being offerings. Besides, this passage differs from the rest of the chapter by employing the second person plural. The contextual rupture is practically evident if we compare the content of the two offerings. Just as the passage on the Thanksgiving offering includes the priestly prebends, the main objective of all of these sacrificial prescriptions in chapters 6 to 7, so should the instructions on the well-being offering prescribe its priestly prebends. But these are located after the digression on the suet and blood in verses 31 to 34. This insert corresponds structurally to 6 verses 12 to 16 in that both are intrusions within their respective chapters and are responsible for the long introductions in the precopes that follow. Because the content of this insert, the banning of the suet of all sacrificial animals, represents the viewpoint of H, this insert and the prior one, together with their editorial linkages, must stem from the hand of H.
Yeah, so it could be H or like some person afterwards, like a redactor, right? Because in another case it would be kind of strange, but yeah. Moreover, so you just talked about Milgram's conclusion on 22 through 27, and I do agree. Yeah, it is a later insertion. But so Noel, this is from Han's book. Moreover, Noel observes that the fact that in verses 23 and 25, the ban on the eating of the suet of domestic animals is connected with their being animals and may be sacrificed on the altar is best explained by the assumption that 22 to 27 already presupposes the ban on profane slaughter in Leviticus 17, as well as the requirement that every animal fit for sacrifice should be offered to Yahweh as a well-being offering. Further thematic and linguistic parallels may also be made between 7:22 and 27 through 27 and H, and of course H being the holiness code, which is in chapter 17 through 27. In particular, the prohibition against eating blood in verses 26 to 27 has its closest parallel in Leviticus 17, 10 through 14. One may also note that the distinction between a dead animal and an animal torn by beasts in 724 is only found in one place, namely Leviticus 17:15. Besides, the introduction of a specific, less rigorous clause for animals which have been found dead in 724 recalls the logic of the instruction of 17:15 through 16 coming after 17:10 through 14. Hence, the verses, so 7:22 through 27, should be assigned to a later revision of Leviticus in the spirit of H.
A little more practical there. Although I have to say that the idea of, if you find the remnants of an animal torn by wild beasts, I think the closest modern equivalent would be roadkill.
Mm-hmm. I have a comment here that I need to read, but I don't know what language this is, and I need somebody
French.
else to read it.
Or
Okay.
Means essentially is very good, or it's indeed is good, or something like that.
Yeah, I only understood the last word, and that was it.
I'm not going to say it out loud because my pronunciation is terrible, but yeah, that's what that means.
En effet, c'est là bien. Bien?
Yep.
Yeah.
Bien, bien.
All right. Well, thank you for that.
Bien, I think is how it's pronounced, but I could be butchering that, but it means essentially like, yes, indeed, this is good or wonderful.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't butcher it as bad as I would.
That's fair.
Eric Wander says, for Tomer and Isaac, who is the oldest Jewish or rabbinic commentator that we have, like the one closer in time to the source, the Bible?
Well, I think you could say maybe Philo, but
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, there is a thing called Inner Biblical Commentary. If I'm not mistaken.
So essentially, you can view many of the texts themselves as commentaries on other parts of the text. So if we don't include that, then yeah, Philo is quite early. Although I don't think he was a rabbi, was he?
He was Jewish.
He was a philosopher, and he lived like around the time of Jesus, but just a little before. That's where we get the logos idea from, that the fourth gospel stole.
When it comes to rabbinic, I think maybe the Talmuds, the Midrash, Targums,
I think
Onkelos.
Targum would be the earliest thing. So translating the Bible into Aramaic.
Onkelos specifically, I think.
Would be a type of commentary. So yeah, those would be the earliest proper.
Yes. Yes. When it comes to you have the distinction between the medieval as well, but it's I think maybe Sadia Gaon as well, you could say, but it's like he's lived from the 10th century.
Targum, the translations into Aramaic, then the actual discussions of the law in the Talmud, Mishnah. Those would be probably some of the earliest stuff.
Yeah. Okay, so verse 30. Wave the breast before the Lord as a wave offering. The Hebrew for wave offering is tnufa, derived from the root hey nun pei, to lift or raise. Levine comments, as Mishnah Menachot 5:6 describes it, the offering was carried to and for in a raised position. The intent being to show that the offering to God for his acceptance. The rite of tenufa was a sufficient mode of sacrifice, although in our case, it merely precedes the burning of certain parts of the offering on the altar and the burning of other parts in pots. Tenufa was a method of presentation suitable for the dedication of the Levites as servants in the sanctuary, according to Numbers 8:11, I think. 11. And for the consecration of precious metals contributed to the sanctuary, as recorded in Exodus 35:22 and 38, verses 24 to 29. It was likewise prescribed for certain grain offerings, no part of which was placed on the altar, such as the offering from the new crop ordained in Leviticus 23, verses 11 and 17. And finally, verse 38, Levine comments, the priestly conception regarding the history of the Israelites claims that during the wanderings of the Israelites through the Sinai desert, they already offered sacrifices. Leviticus 1:1 shows the order of the sacrifices by determining that the instructions for the various sacrifices have been given at the tent of meeting in the desert. According to Numbers 28:6, the regular burnt offering was first started in Mount Sinai, while in Exodus 29 verses 38 to I mistaken there. The instructions of this offering were given as part of the instructions to build the tent of meeting, which were given to Moses in Mount Sinai, according to Exodus 24:12 and onwards. And that's it.
Okay.
I feel like I've done a bit of a rushed job on these commentaries because it's like too
It's repetitive.
It's okay, sweetie. It's really okay. When I said punish me, daddy, I didn't mean bore me to death with blood sacrifices. Not your commentary, Tamara. Your commentary.
Yeah, okay.
No, that was fine today.
Yeah,
we
and
rushed
again,
it 2 weeks ago really aggressively, but today was fine.
yeah.
This book is so
sorry.
very redundant, though, that I mean, I will go back and read things. I'm thinking, I just read this.
Yes.
And then I look back and it's just that saying the same shit again.
How many times have I told you no yeast?
No
It's
yeast.
not really yeast. It's not yeast. It's the NIV.
Don't use the yeast. Yes. No use the yeast.
No wire hangers.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's what
the
I'm
long
thinking.
lobe of the liver.
The protuberant. And again, I'm sorry if I was rude to anybody of you. I didn't mean this. I just wanted to stick to the text and
Oh, no worries, no worries.
I love you for it.
All right,
I
so
really
what
feel
I'm going
bad
to
when
do
I do
now, Seth
This
Andrews
is-
is giving a talk here in my town,
Ooh.
starting in about 10 minutes, and it'll take me too long to get there, but I think I've seen that presentation before. But if he's coming to my town, then I feel it would be rude not to stop in and say hello.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that's what I'm going to do.
Give him
I
our
could
love.
go to another snake
Say hi for all of us
appreciation
too.
day.
Yeah, bring him some unleavened bread fellowship offering.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Or
Bring him a blessing from the
unleavened.
blasphemers.
Yeah. And he also happens to be he's in Deep Ellum, which is too much. It's Seth. How could we get Seth to appreciate Deep Ellum, which is the party district of town?
Wait, I'm hearing what
Well,
noise?
He's a horror fan, and there's that vampire bar.
There is the Hungarian vampire bar where we held our satanic party.
There you go.
Nice.
It'll be so
Excellent.
much fun to get Seth in a satanic
Yes.
Hungarian vampire bar.
Go for the Luciferian, fashionable, stylish vibes, satanic vibe. You can do that with him. He would do that.
He
Okay.
likes
See if
horror
you can
movies.
get him into a cape
Make
as
him like
well.
it.
Yeah,
would
he
be
would
amazing.
look like a vampire if you
That's what
put
I'm
him in
saying.
goth and a cape. He
Yeah.
would fit right in.
Tell him.
Also
Like,
known as
like, I wish
the dungeon master look.
every
Yes.
every time he sees me or Arn, he's just like, y'all always so like, dressed out with like goth stuff or whatever. And I'm like, you could do it, Seth. You just get like a fancy vampire coat, you could pair it with that black t-shirt and stuff and jeans.
Maybe a
feel
nice
he needs
fluffy
to go
shirt.
with the suit
He could
vibe
wear
a little
that
more.
suit.
Lucifer, the television show. Like you could maybe jazz it up a little bit, but make it very formal. I feel like he'd go that angle on vampire.
Mhm.
Also,
He would
I'm
be the
taking
dapper
suggestions
vampire,
for
yes.
ones.
I sent him a meme the other day that Batman didn't become Batman until after his 30s, so it's never too late for a dramatic goth face.
There you go.
It's true. It's true.
There you go. Yep.
Love it.
All right.
If you
Well,
do these things, we expect like a TikTok or something of it.
Yes.
oh yeah, indeed. All right. So I'm gonna go put my hair up because I'm gonna jump in the Jeep. We're taking the Jeep because it's a really hot day and we're going to be in Deep Ellum, which is like a great place for that. I'm gonna grab a python and get on the road because
As one does.
as one does. So we will do what is it? Leviticus 8
8,
Yes.
and hopefully to
On
10
Wednesday,
because
are
that's
we
the
good
unit on itself.
Hey, we finally get back to a bit of the narrative. It's not just burn everything.
and splash blood
It
everywhere.
will actually it will have burn everything.
No,
Yeah, I
you
Oh,
said
wanna-
it's
alas,
not
alas.
just burn everything.
Alas, I'm gonna miss Wednesday. I've got a photography job I gotta go do.
Especially burning.
But I'll catch you
humans.
guys again on Saturday.
All right.
Thank you
Miss
so
you,
much.
Ember.
All right.
See you,
Bye
Amber.
bye, y'all.
Bye,
Later,
everyone.
folks.
Yeah, everyone.
Thank you all.
See you for Atheist Sunday School tomorrow. Bye.
And
Oh,
check
yeah.
Discord.
Sunday school tomorrow. Bye.